Missouri is known as the Cave State. It's home to over 6,000 caves. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine that you're walking into one of these caves. It's cold and damp. You look to your left and you see maybe stalactites or stalagmite rock formations. You look to your right and maybe you see some bats. And you look straight ahead and you see cheese. Yeah, you heard that right. I said cheese. See, it turns out the government has been accumulating and storing cheese in these cheese caves in Missouri since the 1970s. So you might be asking yourself, where did this cheese come from? What are we doing with it? And why does it matter? That's what we're going to talk about today. So it all began in the 1970s. There was a dairy shortage, so the cost for consumers was on the rise. When Jimmy Carter became president, he decided to take action. He figured if he funded the dairy industries, they would create more dairy and the cost would end up being lower. So that's exactly what he did. In 1977, Jimmy Carter put $2 billion over the course of 4 years into the dairy industry. And the dairy industry boomed as a result. The cost of dairy went down for consumers. And that was in part also because dairy consumption as a whole was going down. So between 1970 and 2021, US milk consumption per capita went down 36%, according to Forbes magazine. It went down for numbers of reasons, but one of them was soda was a popular drink. Another is that people were concerned about their health and the nutritional value of milk. Animal activists were concerned about the new practices being put out by the dairy industry since they were using half the cows to make twice the milk they were previously. But the new government funding had allowed them, new uses like antibiotics and hormones and new tools to basically get more milk. So anyways, production went up, consumption went down, and we ended up with a surplus of this milk as a result. So they didn't really know what to do with it, and they figured cheese has a longer shelf life than milk, so we'll just turn it into cheese and we'll store it for now and until later. Well, by the 1980s, we had 500 million pounds of cheese in these cheese caves. And it was starting to go bad. At this point, Ronald Reagan was president, and so he was faced with the task of what are we gonna do with all of this cheese here? So I don't know if any of you have ever heard of something called government cheese, but basically that's what they did with it. They gave this cheese away to those that were faced with hunger. They put it in food banks, they gave it away at community centers, they even gave it to the military, for food. So they did find some uses, and even some of them more recent. In 2021, the government announced that it would use mozzarella and cheddar from these stores for school lunch programs and other federal food nutrition assistance programs. Unfortunately, it's not enough. So we've just continued to accumulate more and more of this cheese, and we're not really getting rid of it at nearly the same rate. At this point, we now have 1.4 billion pounds of cheese in these cheese caves. That's a lot of cheese. 1.4 billion pounds. It's a waste of cheddar. And I mean that like cheese, but even more so, I mean that like it's a waste of cheddar, it's a waste of money. According to the Washington Post, in an article titled "The Best Way to Help Dairy Farmers is to Get Them Out of Dairy Farming," 73% of US dairy producers' revenue comes from the government. That means that only 20% or 27% of their sales are creating their revenue. That's crazy. That's crazy. So as the demand is going down, production is still continuing to go up even to this day. Between 2010 and 2016, production increased another 13%, even though dairy consumption continued to decline. According to the Wall Street Journal, in 2016, the American dairy industry dumped 43 billion gallons of milk in fields, animal feed, and anaerobic lagoons. Because there was just so much milk. They couldn't even turn it into cheese and put it in the cheese caves. They just dumped it. Northeastern University Political Review in 2022 published an article titled "My Beef with Dairy: How the US Government is Bailing Out a Dying Industry," which stated that $43 billion were given to the dairy industry in subsidies in 2016. And in 2017, $36.3 billion more were given in subsidies to the dairy industry. That's a lot of money. Now, it was turned into cheese because it has the longest shelf life, but that was part of the problem in itself. Forbes magazine suggests that we should have become a dairy nutrition provider. That would have offered us a way into other markets that weren't declining like dairy. This is products that do use dairy. So things like Ensure or Greek yogurt, powdered drink mixes, liquid shakes, edible bars, and muscle milk. Those are all on the rise, but unfortunately, it might be too late because at this point, General Mills dominates that market so much that it would be really difficult to get in on products that already exist like that. So we would have to come up with something completely new. The government solutions are minimal. They create ads like "Got Milk" so that we drink more milk and consume more dairy. Or they create bashing campaigns, which label soy milk, almond milk, oat milk as imitation milks, making it seem like they're lesser than dairy milks. The point that I'm trying to make is that we need to stop pushing products that are coming from a dying industry. These products are becoming obsolete, and we need to keep up with the changing times. We need to vote no on bills that support the government supporting the dairy industry as a general whole. We need to get away from this dairy industry that can't survive on its own and move on. The exploitation of animals is our planet's biggest ecological threat that we face, and it's also a threat to people because the excess consumption of dairy is making people sick, and we're spending billions of dollars in healthcare that was preventable in the first place. But our government's just continuing to push us to consume more dairy so that they can unload their surplus that they created using our tax dollars. Just some food for thought. It's no Gouda. I hope that wasn't too cheesy.